Welcome to Wholly Unapologetic. I'm here with my friend Fawn. How you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well. So I'm really excited because you're the owner of the Sexploratorium down in Denver.
It's more complicated as the Sexploratorium because we wanted to put a whole bunch of letters in there to make it complicated and hard to say and spell.
So thank you for
Right?
correcting.
Yeah.
So we met actually last year at the transgender conference that I was at. Do you remember meeting me in person?
I do. Yeah.
Wow, I must have made such an impression.
I really love it's one of my favorite days and I'm super bummed that it's not happening this year. I'm already like in grief about that. But I really love it because I meet so many interesting, fun, amazing people that I go, "Oh my God, I hope I get to see them again." Like I hope I get to talk to
Yeah,
them again. I'm very extroverted, so I like to talk to everybody, but but I meet the best, funnest people there. And
yeah.
so I like my memory is more open to that day of like, oh, I'm like searching who's my next best friend.
Yeah, I totally felt that way after I sat through your session. I was like, wow, this is somebody I need to get to know. Not only because you're super brilliant, but you're super funny and
Oh,
fun to
thank you.
engage with and very personable. So one thing that really stood out to me actually in your presentation was something
Yeah.
that I had never heard before. And as a trans person, it felt so affirming. And you had said something to the effect of at conception, we're all females. And then, 6 to 7 weeks later, our brain starts to develop and our body changes. Can you explain a little bit to our viewers kind of what that process is, the biological process of that, and like
Yeah.
how that really is true and scientific?
Yeah. Yeah, it was something that I became really interested in because of actually the a lot of it was the first Trump presidency because he put out this proclamation. It was weaker than the second proclamation of that it's that biological sex or gender is immutable. It's fixed at birth. It's just a whole lot of really uneducated bullshit. I was just, it was like such uh, an infuriating amount of bullshit, right? That I thought, oh my God, if the president of the United States thinks this, like I really have to double down my efforts to educate because a lot of people believe that, and it's so very wrong, and any biologist knows that it's wrong. There's no biologist, they never had somebody come in who's a biologist who says yes, this is exactly what's happening, right? Nobody. There was no Congress where they were interviewing biologists and any biologist agreed with them on this, but they treat it as if it is biological fact, and it drives me nuts. So I really wanted to create a way of describing all the things that actually go into the formulation of sex and gender from a biological point of view that everybody could understand, right? So I taught psychology for 20 years, and so it was a lot of trying to take these complicated concepts and put them in a fun and easily understandable way so that people could really take them in, because if you're not enjoying yourself when you're learning, you're not remembering. So I really wanted to look at what are the basics that create this masculine or feminine body and mind. We often talk about them as separate things, which is another thing that kind of drives me nuts. That somehow our brain is not related to how we feel or what we perceive of ourselves, right? So this idea that they are separate, like we've always talked about, well, what's your biological gender? And or sex, even using different terms for them. What's your gender? That isn't part of the biology part, right? That isn't connected to the biology. And so there were six different things that really affect us become other than female, than one side of the continuum of female. And because yeah, we all start there, and then we get certain triggers in our bodies, and you're usually based on what hormones we're exposed to what hormones are being created in our body, what chromosomes are creating those hormones, and then whether or not our body accepts that. And so that was the big part of the model that I created was, so we had like what chromosomes you have. And people understand that, right? We have XX and XY, right? Easy to understand. And that's where a lot of the conservative thought process stops. They go, okay, there's XX and XY, done. And if that were the case, then we could say done. You're right. Oh my God, well, no, we couldn't because there's a whole bunch of other things. But at least they would be something that we could stop there. But that's just the beginning, right? There are so many more combinations, including XO, where there is no other chromosome, which is Turner syndrome. So I use a lot of intersex variations to explain how we know this, right? Because there are intersex people in the world. Give space for that. And that's another thing that we've ignored, right? Is that these people exist and they fit their idea of biology in terms of like there are biological similarities or there's a mixture of male and female in intersex people. And so we have kind of the current administration is that these people really don't exist. And the Olympics have tried for since the modern Olympics have begun to find a way to say this person is male or this person is female. And they used chromosomes at one point because they're like, oh, finally, we don't have to look at people's genitals. And only the women, right? They're not looking at the male's genitals because they don't care. But they were like, oh, finally, chromosomes. And then they rediscovered that there are intersex people who have XXY and XXXY and XYY and all of these different variations that they didn't know what to do with. So they thought, oh my God, we thought we could just easily decide whether chromosomes are male or female, and we can't. So they had to give that up. And so you have the chromosomes, and then you have whether or not the chromosomes are accepted by the body. So for some people who have a Y chromosome, their body does not accept it, and they develop as a female. They are XY. There's no denying it. There is absolute proof XY, but their body is fully female. So these proclamations that are being made about what the reality is of sex and gender are, again, not based in biology, right? And then you get into hormones. So then you have hormones, what kind of hormones are there, and then if the body accepts those hormones, because my body can make testosterone and it not accept it. And my body is a female, a cisgender female. My body can make a huge amount of testosterone naturally. And that can masculinize parts of me. I can get a mustache. I can grow body hair on my chest and other places that are traditionally a masculine pattern. Does that make me less female? If I take estrogen, then is it gender affirming care? Because I don't make enough? It's such a weird thing. And then the last two are really about brain structure and body structure. So we have the actual genitals that can develop as feminized or masculinized, can look more like a penis or more like a vulva. And then we have brain structure, and that's the one that you talked about. And I had to get through a lot of things to come back to it. But our brains masculinize and feminize as well. So there's a whole bunch of areas in our brains that go to either one side or the other. And I can have a whole bunch that feminize and a whole bunch that masculinize and a whole bunch that are in the middle. And so it's this pattern, this individual pattern in my brain. But that pattern does tell myself, my sense of self, whether I feel comfortable with things or not comfortable, whether I am attracted to things or not attracted to things. So this idea that gender isn't a biological thing, that my sense of being female is not a biological thing is ridiculous, right? It's not coming out
Mm.
of the ether. It's based in the patterns that my brain creates. Now, what creates that? What why does my brain develop in that way? But we know that it does. We know that there's that mixture of masculinized and feminized. And so when we did MRI studies, primarily on trans females, trans women, we found that their brains looked much more like cis female brains than cis male brains. So their brains were biologically structured to say, I am a female. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there can be a difference in the way that your body is naturally formed, right, at
Right?
conception, and how
Absolutely.
your brain is actually configured and how you actually think and feel and express yourself in
Correct.
society.
Yeah, that whole process is even on a different timeline. Our bodies develop first. The genitals start to differentiate, to change between
Mhm.
male and female, or a combination. At 6 weeks of development in the womb. And then our brain starts to masculinize or feminize at 12 weeks. So we can absolutely have a difference in how our body is developing versus how our brain is developing. And one of the most interesting studies, it was actually at that same conference that we went to, but many years back, there was this person who was doing a presentation on not MRI, phantom pain. So phantom pain is like if I get a finger cut off, I can still feel that finger, right? My brain
Yep.
knows that that finger was there at some point. And so they'll get itchy and, things happen. So they looked at people who've had double mastectomies, and both trans men and cisgender women. And the cisgender women, it was all due to cancer or concern of cancer. And the trans men, it was all they wanted it done, right? It was
Right.
wanted
By choice.
by choice. Yeah. So what they found was that most of the women who had double mastectomies before cancer reasons, the cis women, had phantom pain or phantom feelings in their breasts. None of the trans men had phantom pain or phantom feelings in their breasts. None. We know that our
Yeah, I've
parts of
never
our
experienced
brain.
it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
really does tell us something about that relationship between our brains and our physical bodies, right? That our brains are
Mm.
telling us this thing should be there or it shouldn't be there. People who will have like an amputee syndrome, I can't remember the exact term for it, but they want to be an amputee. They say my
Mhm.
leg does not feel right being on here. This is
Yeah.
wrong. And what we're starting to understand is there's a thing in their brain that really has erased that leg. That leg is not supposed to
Mm.
be there in their brain.
Mm.
We've always thought of it as like anxiety or depression or something gone wrong in experience,
Mhm.
but it could be there's something in their brain that's telling them shouldn't be there. um
Wow, this is
eh,
so interesting because before I had top surgery, I had no feeling in my chest. And I would
yeah,
have like a breast massage or something like that. And they'd be like, hey, is this pleasurable to you? And I'm like, no, like I can't feel it. Like my body has numbed out and disassociated because I don't want those pieces on me anymore.
yeah,
And so it's
yeah,
really interesting as you're talking because it's like, I never thought about that, but I've never had a phantom feeling in my chest. It's always been like, this is how it's supposed to be.
yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, and it is those structures in your brain that are telling you this is how your body should look. Um, it's awesome. Like it's so yeah. I got really excited about that particular talk. I was blown away. Like, and that's what I love about those kind
Yeah.
of conferences. Again, why I'm so bummed that we're so hungry for knowledge because so few people are doing any research on any queer issues at all, let alone trans issues. My God, I mean and now
Mhm. It's
funding
not going
is
to happen.
gone. Right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
so we're just going to go into this really dark period where we don't learn anything. Well, we don't learn anything good. we're gonna learn some things. But
um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
With
yeah. I
every bad
remember.
experience. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
for sure. No, it's all good. Um, so I remember I was a conservative Republican Christian. That's how I was
Really?
brought up. Yeah, and so when I went to this conference, I was just, coming out as trans, and I was starting to reformulate the way that I think about this world and some of the factual information that I thought was fact, but actually may not have been based in scientific research and things like that. And I remember hearing a quote or a statistic about intersex people and how there there's as many intersex people as there are redheads, and I
Hmm.
had no understanding of what intersex was.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you serious? Like, I've run into people that are intersex and I had no clue because I run into redheads, once every 2, 3 days, right? So it's like, how
Right.
often am I running into people that have no existence in this world, but they really do exist, and nobody's actually saying anything about it and their experience in this world and how difficult it might be to actually be in such a cis het environment
Hmm.
and try to flourish.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes me so passionate about talking about intersex variations and intersex people, because I really feel like it it cuts off this conversation about, is this okay or not? Is gender variation okay? Well, it's a natural biological function. It's a natural part of human beings. It's a natural variation. So if we really understand that from a biological level, then the conversation is done, right? We can move on to other things of like, okay, now we have this group of people who have no rights or have less rights. And so how can we solve that? And
Mm-hmm.
that becomes the conversation. Um,
Exactly.
but that's part of what the Republican Party has really done, is switch that conversation to, can is it even there? It's, and they've proclaimed, of course, it's not. It does not
Well, and the
exist.
wild thing to me is that they see us as a threat. And
Yeah,
it's like, hold on
yeah,
a second. Like, we're 1 to 2% of the population.
right.
We're not a threat. We don't have the resources to become a threat. Even if
Yeah,
we were to all come together, right? There's
yeah,
99% of the population out there that, like, can we just exist and live our lives and keep going about our lives because we're not doing any damage, right?
yeah,
Whereas the top 1%, it feels like they're coming down on us, and they're the ones that are actually doing the damage and are a threat because they have the
yeah,
resources and so to do so.
yeah. And I mean, that's everything that they accuse people of. That's what they're doing. And it's it's a hard time to live in the world. Like, it's a hard time to have a good day, because there's always this pressure of, and we're falling into, a Nazi autocracy. So how's that going
I
to?
would have guessed it could happen. I never would have guessed it could happen this fast. I think that's
Yeah,
what's been so awakening to me.
yeah. I mean, I feared it in past presidential um time periods. Like, I remember thinking with George W. Bush, like, the trains are coming for us. Like, I really had a lot of fear about what he would do um to queer people in general. And now it looks quaint. Like, I'm like, oh, George. Like, I like, he looks so smart now comparatively, and benign, and then the first Trump presidency, I
Mhm.
thought the same thing, and I just like, how can we get through this? But now they know what they're doing, and now it's getting really, really scary, and it's so scary for so many people. And I'm Canadian as well,
Mm.
and as well as queer, and it is a weird time to be Canadian. Um, it really, like, just one day I woke up and, like, we're doing what to Canada? We're like going to war with Canada? Like, what what is happening? Like, it it's bizarre to just, like, one day wake up and your people are now the scapegoat of the moment.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I, And I really
Yeah.
never thought
It,
Canadian, like that would be the one, like of all the things that I have.
well, and it makes me wonder what we don't know, right? I just saw a meme actually this morning about Barone, Trump's son,
Yeah.
and it was a picture of him next to Trudeau. And if you look at it, the similarities are eerie. It's like almost like she had a kid with him, and maybe Trump's trying to get back at them. You should actually, if you get a
This is
chance, go ahead and
wonderful.
Google both of those pictures side by side. It is
Nice.
wild to see the resemblance between the two.
So that's the kind of conspiracy theory I like. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, then it totally makes sense. Trump's just mad at Canada, right?
I
Because
could see that. Yeah, I
yeah.
could see that. He always did have some jealousy about Trudeau. So did I. Like I was like, oh, why can't he be president? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's segue
Yes.
into what you actually do for a living and
Yeah.
why did you start up this organization? What is your advocacy? What are you trying to do? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I started the Sexploratorium about a year and a half ago. And like I said, I had been teaching college psychology for over 20 years. And I love teaching. It's my passion. I love every bit of it. I do it randomly to people without their consent, probably, because I'm like, let me tell you about your prostate. It's a magical thing. Like, and I get very excited about things.
Yeah.
Bad name. It's got a bad rap. And people are so afraid of the butt, but it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a friendly little thing. My wife made these vulva pillows, and I was like, well, you got to have a butthole. And she's like, well, do I really? Yes, you need a butthole. Of course. And she made the cutest little buttholes. They're my favorite part. I like point them out to everybody. Like, look at the little butthole. It's just so cute. Perfect. And what were we talking about? I don't even remember now. I got into buttholes.
Yeah, what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. I talk about buttholes a lot. Uh, so I love teaching, and but it got to the point where I didn't feel like I was doing enough. So I was one of the main teachers of human sexuality, but still that equaled about 60 students a year, maybe.
Mhm.
And that's one institution, but it's still out of 2,000 students, it's nothing. And I just
Right.
I I was a social worker as well, and one of the things that I found very difficult to be a social worker, I worked for the Coalition for the Homeless, was it just felt like Sisyphus. You're just rolling this boulder up the hill every day, and the system would just crush you and your clients and everything around you every day, and you
Mhm.
try to do it again, and it was just awful in so many ways. You were just working against this huge system. And that's why I felt like I was just working against this enormous ignorance that we all have of sexuality, because we don't talk about it and we're not allowed to learn about it in school. And then as adults, well, okay, have at it, just do something. And we're
Figure it
racked
out.
with yeah, figure it out. And we're all racked with shame and guilt and anxiety about it, because we've been told all these horrible things. I was raised in the era of AIDS, so I wasn't raised very religious, but I had the, like, you're gonna die if you have sex. And so we were all kind of shell shocked, and now there's just this fog of ignorance, where they don't even get the fear, they just get nothing. They blur it, they just take it out of things, and
Mhm.
it's created this really deep problem, where, like, one of the main things that I would have to correct in classes was that women do not pee from their vaginas.
Mhm.
And that was that's commonly held belief about among men
Mhm.
and women, that women pee from their vaginas. And it's such a, I mean, you could say, well, who cares? Like, who cares if they don't know that exact thing? But it does matter. Like, it really, it shows how little we understand about sometimes our own genitalia, right? Our own,
Yeah.
in such a important part of our world, that we can't discuss, that we can't ask questions. And when we do ask questions, if even of doctors, they get nervous. They don't know what to say. I used to teach for the PA program, which is the physician assistants. And so they were all these, kind of medical professionals in training. They had all had extensive anatomy. And I came in and I was like, the first thing I'm going to do is humiliate you, because I'm going to teach you a bunch of things as a psychology professor that you don't know about anatomy. And you're going to be mad because why don't you know this about anatomy? Why don't you know these basic fundamental things like women's pleasure spots that
Mhm.
you would be able to pass on to a client who is having trouble creating lubrication, is having painful sex, which is going to be a lot of the people you see.
Yeah.
Why don't you know that? And again, it's fighting this system. Yeah.
Part of it, I think, is just the fact that we're not encouraged to touch our own bodies and to
Right.
explore and have curiosity and find out, okay, do I like this sensation? Do I not like this sensation? Or even, what does it look like? Right? Like, what
Right.
does my vulva look like? What does
Yeah.
my anus look like? Like,
Yeah.
and a lot of times we don't even go to look at it until we have a problem, and then it's like, oh, what's wrong down there?
Right.
And
Yeah. And then
then
they're
it's
finally
like,
like,
and then
ah.
you can't diagnose it because you have no idea what it actually should look like when you don't have the issue.
Yeah, that's a huge point. I was having the conversation with this heterosexual couple the other day at the shop. He was really shocked that women wouldn't know that they don't pee for their vaginas, and I was like, "It's so easy not to know that. Like, it's really easy not to know anything about your vulva because you don't explore it and you can't see it often, at least not
Yeah.
much of it." Um,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, my parents were very open about sex, or at least I thought they were. Like, I really grew up with this idea. And as I get older, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of missing pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Like the focus was really on how to prevent sexual violence or what to do if that happens to you. Like, that
Yep.
was the main key to my education at home about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom wanted me to know basics of, like, periods and things like that, but the main, like, sex talk kind of stuff that was beyond anatomy was really that, which,
Yep.
great, very limited. I didn't learn, how do you say yes to things? How do you know if it's just, hormones, or you really want to have sex with this person, or if you'll regret it, or if, like, how do you tell people what you like? How do you know what you like?
Yeah.
None of that was there.
Or even how to find pleasure or give
Yeah,
pleasure to someone else.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, like, when I took human sexuality in college, I learned about the clitoris for the first time, and I was kind of pissed off. I called my mom. I was like, "What is this? Why wouldn't you talk about that? Like, why was this not part of the basic conversation?" She's like, "Well, honey, I
Yeah.
never even thought about it." But why? Like, why? Like, that would have saved me so much time and effort.
I remember when
um,
I found my clitoris for the first time. I was, I don't know, like 12, right? And I thought it was a pimple. And I was like, "Mom, I have a problem. Like, how do I get rid of this bump?" She didn't tell me what
oh,
it was. She was just like, "Don't touch it. You'll be fine. It's all good." And I'm right.
yeah, I mean, so many great opportunities that we miss because we often don't know how to talk about it. We don't know what to say about it, or really what it is, even. Like, you know, she may not have had a really good understanding of what a clitoris was and how important it is
Yeah,
to sexuality.
exactly.
So I really wanted to expand my reach with education. Like, how do I get more people? Because one of the things I would experience in class was people would bring their loved ones to class. And I would love to say it's because I was an amazing teacher, but nobody did this for any other class. Like social psych, they weren't bringing their mother. Uh, but sexuality, they did. Like, I had a number of mothers in that class where they would just, like, I keep hearing about this and I wanted to check it out. And I loved it. I've always encouraged people to bring other people. And they would bring boyfriends and girlfriends and roommates and friends and just people all over the place. It was amazing, and it was
Yeah.
because we're so desperate. There's no other place to go for information
Mm-hmm.
that is really trustworthy. Um, the internet is a lot of voices, and it's a lot of opinions, and it's a lot of garbage, right? And how do you sift through the garbage to find real answers?
I'm on a lot of forums, and it's so interesting to me, like the questions that people will ask, and then they'll just take all of the answers from people and believe them to be true. And I'm
Yeah.
sitting there going, as a sexologist, going, "Oh my word! Like what they have told you is false information. It is not informed. It is not scientific. It is not factual, and you're believing it to be true, and you're going on to live your life." Like, there's a piece of me that's like, "Hey, go to somebody like you or someone like me, pay $50 for a ticket to an event just so you can actually have grounded, factual, scientific evidence and understand your body and what it really means to be sexual and enjoy pleasure in your body."
Yeah. Yeah, and we are so much online that we forget how useful it is to like physically go and read and experience things. We wanted
Yeah.
to I wanted to make the museum really sensual. Very
Mm-hmm.
very involving the senses, so there's something to smell, there's something to listen to, there's something to write, it is um because that's how we learn, and sexuality is no different than any other topic. We learn through the same patterns, and being able to see things and ask questions of somebody that most likely has a good science-based answer is so important, and it's being lost a lot from people's experiences. um yeah, so I just really I wanted I've been to a lot of sex museums. Like my wife and I, we just love going traveling, and being a professor allowed me to do a lot of that because you get the summers off.
Yeah.
And I've been to sex museums all over the world. And what I realized was none of them were really educationally based. They're fun, they're enjoyable. Like there's a boob room in the New York Museum, which I could die happy in there. I like just put put my dying body there, and I will just be so happy in my last few minutes, right? Or just let me live there for a few years. I don't know. I love it. It's a fantastic thing. But I don't learn anything about the breast by going
Yeah.
there. It's a very fun
It's
sensory
entertainment.
entertainment. Yeah, they're all very entertainment based. And I love entertainment, don't get me wrong. But I really craved something that when you finish, you were like, "Oh my God, I didn't even know I didn't know that."
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to go and learn more about that, because what else don't I know? So that it becomes like a spark of, there's so much out there more that I could learn about sexuality, and that it's a viable topic to dive into.
Mm-hmm.
Um and the funny thing is the closest I ever came to seeing kind of what I envisioned, and kind of my inspiration for a lot of it was the Children's Museum in Amsterdam,
Okay.
uh, which weird. But yeah, I had taken a group of students to Amsterdam, and they had left with the other professor, and I just had the day to kind of look around before I went to my next destination. And I went to the Nemo, which I thought was an aquarium because it sounds like an aquarium. And it was right on the water, but it was a children's museum. So I was like, I don't know why I'm here or what I'm doing, but I guess I'll just wander around a little bit, see what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a teen area, and it's not like the teen area was blocked off, and only teens could go there. There was kids of all ages there, but it was the designated, teens might find this more interesting area. There was a museum exhibit that looked at a whole bunch of different things with sex, and it looked at pheromones, and it had like this fun French kissing booth where you put your hand through and you were like a giant tongue, and they like the boys were battling tongues. I mean, it was wonderful. And one of the things in the exhibit was this machine that looks at whether or not there's an erection in the penis, and another one that looks at if there's moisture in the vagina and how much. And so we use this a ton in sex research, right? To measure erections and measure excitement. I had never, ever, ever seen these before, ever. And I had been teaching, for at least 15 years at that point. And I thought, what is going on that I had to come to a children's museum in Amsterdam to see this really fundamental piece of equipment from my field? As a professional in this field, what is going on? And so then I really started to think about what we need in this country and what could I do to kind of fill in those gaps, or to create, I mean, they're gaps like are caverns, to fill in those cavernous gaps of our understanding of sexuality. And that's when we started to create the museum. So it's in a lot of ways, and some of my students have come to see it and they agree that it really is my class, like on walls. So what I would teach in a normal human sexuality, you really can get just by going around the museum. And of course, it's not everything, but it's a large part of the ones that I felt were especially important. What needed to be normalized, what needed to be highlighted, and what has been kind of hidden in weird ways, like our prostitution history in Colorado, the madams of Colorado. Like, why is that not discussed even? We have multiple Colorado history museums now, and not one of them talk about the prostitution,
Wow, that's interesting.
including Colorado women's history. Um, yeah.
Wow.
Joke that in interviews, like in yes.
So, what do you wish people knew in regards to sex, expression, identity, gender, and orientation?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I want people to understand, and this comes back to our conversation about sex and gender, is that it's all a continuum. There really is no hard and fast boxes, hard and fast rules. Um, Alfred Kinsey, he's most famous for coming up with that same idea, right? That sexual orientation is not a continuum, that it's not just gay and straight, that there's a whole bunch in the middle. And he actually he was a brilliant writer. Like his books were really amazingly beautifully well written. And one of the things that he said is that everything in the natural world is on a continuum. And that is spot on, right? We it's taken us a good 60 years to really understand that, and be able to see that in biology better. But one of the things we have in the museum is the anatomy wall starts with feminization and goes to masculinization, and that's really how sex and gender look. It's not this I am female, or I am a woman, I am male, I am a man. It's all of this middle stuff, right? I'm a cisgender female, but I carry a wallet, and I don't wear makeup, and I get misgendered because of that a lot. I don't wear a bra, mostly because I don't have really big boobs and I don't have to. Uh, but a lot of people think I'm a man.
Mm,
And why is that? What does that mean? And why do I get pissed about that? Like,
mm,
it's some, like my wife is gender queer. They prefer the term wife for our relationship because we get to do whatever we want, right? The world is our oyster. We get to define ourselves however we want because there's this huge continuum, and it doesn't just go from one pole to the other, right? There's a whole bunch of poles of things that are going on with sexual orientation and how we express ourselves. And so we're all just somewhere on here. And so maybe I'm a more masculine woman. That doesn't make me male, right? That just means that I'm on the masculine side of feminine. Um and it depending on my culture and depending on the people I'm around. Like if I'm around a bunch of lesbians, I'm like, I'm really feminine. I'm like, but if
Yeah.
I'm around a bunch of Republican women, I may feel incredibly masculine and go like I'm basically a dude around them. So even how we express ourselves in its own continuum is looks different when we compare ourselves to other people.
Yeah.
And so it's just much more broad than I had an understanding of before, whether it's sexual orientation or it's gender or it's our biological selves or our brains. It's it's uh it's much more varied, and that's beautiful. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I remember when my world shifted because I used to believe in black and white, right
Yeah.
and wrong, men and women, right? I had all these boxes. And I started to think about the rules that we had and how I saw the world. And it's, somebody just made that up. They were like, oh,
Yeah.
this works for me, so this is how it's going to be. That's not necessarily true for me. I think there's actually color and there's a lot more nuance and fluidity
Yeah.
to this, right? It's not just the way that somebody says it is. There's way more complexity to the system than what we want to believe to be true.
Right. Because that's hard to understand, and it takes some it takes a broader perspective to understand that fully. Um and it's easy to go with the black white, like when you said the black and white, like I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't even talk about like race. Like we've tried to put race in those boxes too, right? When race is a totally made up concept. But we've tried to define exactly what makes you a black person or what makes you a white person, or um eh, I had this conversation with a friend of mine actually not too long ago about like if I said the person was Jewish and they said, well, they're white, and we had a conversation about is that true, or can they be both true at the same? It's these boxes that we created and then go, I don't understand why people don't fit in the boxes.
It's
Well,
because
kind
our
of made them
brains
up.
are trying to simplify. Yeah, it's because our
Exactly.
brains are trying to simplify it, right? These complexities that we see, we're trying to figure out a way to understand it, and so that's the only way we can understand it, right? Is by simplifying it to such a nuanced space.
Right. And that's what I like about psychology. I like giving names to things and to understand them in context with other things. But it's also a very frustrating part where you go, well, we just decided that this was a bad thing or this is a good thing, or and we keep changing our minds. And I think that's the nice thing about science, though, is that we can continue to understand it deeper. The changes to DSM have been very good, especially when it comes to
Yeah,
things like gender dysphoria. That
right.
it wasn't about being trans that gave you a mental illness. It was the anxiety and depression related to that was the mental illness. That is a fundamental and impressive good change.
Mm-hmm.
um but when you can't make those leaps of new, like I get new information and so it changes the way that I experience the world, that's really dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we've kind of gotten to today with a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, is like any change is a threat. So if I
Mm.
understand this in a different way, then I have to change everything, and that is a threat to my well-being, and I cannot do that.
Yeah.
Um,
We've taken out the ability to have curiosity,
yeah,
exploration, and critical thinking, right?
right.
That's wild to me.
And And that's what a lot of really fundamentalist religion does. You are not allowed to question it. You are not allowed to seek out more information, even about the history of the religion, often.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Yeah, you
that
just have to
becomes
believe it
really,
to be true.
yeah, because for a friend of mine was raised Pentecostal fundamentalist, and he said the worst thing you could do in that religion was to not fully believe.
Mm.
That was the biggest sin, because then you knew about Jesus but you were turning your back somehow. And so even to have a moment of doubt, that was the worst thing you could do.
Yeah. Just just have to have faith. Believe it to be
Yeah,
true.
Right?
Even if everything else that you see outside of you is telling you otherwise,
That's right.
believe it to be true.
And isn't that like the MAGA party of don't listen to anything anybody says to you, only listen to what the grand leader is saying. He's the
Oof.
only one who can tell you the truth, who won't lie to you, who won't. And even if everything he says radically changes the next day, buy Tesla. It doesn't
It
matter.
is so wild to me how much flipping he does, because I just saw a video the other day of how Trump was in a news conference with NBC News, and Matt Lauer had asked him, if Kate Jenner wanted to go use the restroom at your facilities at Trump Towers, which restroom could they use? And Trump's response was, "Oh, it's no big deal. They can use whatever restroom they like. Why are we putting so much energy into this?" And it's like, hold up, right? When he has an agenda and it actually is good for him to actually, go against the trans, he's going to
Mm-hmm.
say something. But in this instance, it's so wild. Back in 2016, he didn't think trans issues were a thing. He didn't think,
Right.
trans people using a restroom were a problem. He didn't see any issue with it at all. And
Yep.
now, what, less than 10 years later, he's totally flipped.
Yeah. Yeah, because he knows what sells. Uh, he's a good salesman. He's a con man. I mean, that's what con men do, is they sell you really
And
well.
And the
Uh,
wild thing to me is the fact that people are blindly accepting what he says to be true versus
yeah.
actually going out and doing the research to find out what may or may not be true.
Yeah, it's really I've seen so many people that I love really be immersed in the cult. Like one of our best friends, her parents, I love them dearly. Like they are the best people in the world. Like we have gone to their house to do photo shoots with our big gay family. Like they are wonderful, supportive. They hosted their daughter's gay wedding. Like they are wonderful people. They're also religious, and they had gone to this church with a trans pastor. I don't remember if trans woman or trans man. I apologize. Um, but they encouraged their daughter, my best friend, to go to the church and like see how great this is. And she went. And she's like, "You're right. This was really nice. This was really wonderful." And that was a couple of years ago. And they now want to leave that church because the pastor has become too political.
Mm.
And I thought, what has happened to these wonderful, amazing people? Like they have been inundated by this MAGA bullshit so much that they have lost this basic empathy that they used to have in spades. And I just, ugh, it's it's awful. It's awful. I can't imagine like having close family members be immersed in that like that. I'm very lucky that isn't the case with me, but it's horrifying to watch people who I had considered smart and educated and like I said, empathetic.
Yeah, and I have really close family members and
Yeah,
really close friends that
yeah,
basically put Trump on a pedestal, and they don't see what he's doing is detrimental, right? And so I
yeah,
think it's hard for me to have conversations with them because all I want to do is exist and
yeah,
have
yeah.
basic human rights like everybody else. And
Right.
instead, what I'm doing is I'm waking up every morning having to fight for the right to live.
Yeah,
And for them to not see the damage that it does to someone that they're so close to, that they actually care
yeah,
about, right? Where
yeah,
is the compassion? Where is the empathy? Where is the advocacy for, if you truly do love me, would you want my best interests at hand?
yeah.
And honestly, all I want to do is be able to use the restroom. It's a
Right.
basic
So let
human
me
bodily
be.
function. Just let me
Yeah.
be. Like, I'm not out there doing any damage to anybody else,
Right.
right? It's wild
Right.
to me. But why do I have to waste my time trying to fight for that basic human right when you have, uh, I'll just say it, Republican white men that are going out there and, going out with girls that are under the age of 18, and then they're getting caught doing something sexual. Like,
because they're bragging about it, and
right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Like, it just blows my mind that there's 806 bills right now against trans existence.
Mm.
When we're not the issue, we're not the problem. And
Yeah,
yet you have all these other people that are doing great harm to
yeah,
people in society, and we're not even batting an eye to
yeah. And that's why I really wanted to make sure that, again, the museum was not only like trans inclusive, but like trans celebratory. Like that this is uh, not something to be ignored. It's something to really understand and go, what a wonderful world that all of this exists and that we have these great variations. Um, yeah, it's we're all just trying to stem that tide of racist, transphobic fascism.
that.
And yeah, you just don't know if you're doing enough. I it's a weird time to live. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and yeah, a friend of mine is a trans man in the military,
Okay.
and I was just talking to him, and he was actually, it's funny. Very early on in the museum, we were robbed, and somebody came and just threw a rock through our window and went right in and just took the cash register, and it was him. He lived kind of nearby, and he calls me at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's like, "There's somebody has broken your window," and he stayed there like on guard until I was able to get there. Hours later, I didn't get the message for hours. He just stayed there and was like, "Well, I had to make sure that nobody else got in." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're such an amazing human being! Like, uh, just oh God, I love you so much. You're just fantastic." And like these are the kind of people you'd want in the military, right? Like these are the kind of
Right.
uh, you know duty driven, wonderful people, and I just kept thinking of him through the whole thing of like, oh, this is the only thing he wanted to do was just serve his country. And I don't want to do
Hmm.
that. There's no way. But that's all he wanted to do. And he's getting shit on just constantly. And that was before Trump. Like it's from people who not in the military. He says really great things about other military people. So I don't want to put that out there, but from like from citizens who have never been in the military,
Yeah.
and now he's getting it from the commander in chief, and for what? Nothing, for nothing.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yep. And it's wild
Yeah,
to me. I mean, I've seen all these memes out there of like, you've gone to the bathroom with a trans person and you've probably never known it. Or
yeah,
there's another meme out there that's like, there's a woman that's saying, I'm not afraid of a trans man coming into the bathroom. What I'm afraid of is a cis male coming into the
yeah,
bathroom. That's when my rights are at risk, right?
yeah.
It's just, yeah, society.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the argument breaks down quickly, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't have to, because he's got this. If you create an emotional reaction, then you've got people. And so fear is the easiest one to create. And so he's been stoking, really, the whole party's been stoking this fear of anybody who does not meet their gender specific standard. Somebody was in Iowa just tried to do one that included like gender affirming haircuts. Like that it would be illegal to like have my
Yep.
daughter have a short haircut.
Yep.
What is happening? It's just, oh,
Yeah.
I-
And in all honesty, what it is it all boils down to this: fear and
yeah,
ignorance,
yeah,
and the
yep,
inability to actually critically think about the world around them and
yeah,
see, okay, let's have some curiosity around this.
yeah, yeah. So I know from the study of history that it will come back again. But what makes me afraid is one of the things that we have is this book from 1949 It was written right after Kinsey's, and it's a sexual anatomy book. So it's a whole lot of drawn pictures. It's very intersex inclusive, and it's from 1949. And the images there, as soon as I found this book, I was just absolutely in love. And we blew them up because I thought they were so essential because they had like different um penis shapes and like gave them names and stuff. Things I had just never seen in any textbook. And I had somebody come through who had was a funeral director and he got his bachelor's degree in human anatomy. And he says, I've never seen anything like that. Like no textbook has ever shown that. And it has like different phalluses, like from the clitoris to a penis, and different variations of that. You know, the intersex variations, and it's from 1949, and so we had the information. We knew it well. We had it in scientific textbooks, and then we lost it as a culture, right? Then the 50s came along and we scrubbed it all. And that's what it feels like is happening right now. We are scrubbing all of this understanding and knowledge from these websites, from uh, uh, from our understanding as citizens. We're just getting rid of it and pretending like it doesn't exist. And so, is it going to take 50 years before we come back to this again and go, "Oh yeah, we figured that one out"? Like that's what scares me.
Yeah, it
How
feels
many years is going to be affected by this?
yeah, it feels like he's just running the playbook, and that he's just creating mass chaos right now. But it's already
Yeah,
been done, right? He's just
yeah,
following what's been done previously.
yeah. Luckily, he's doing a bad job of it. That's the only thing that keeps me still breathing is he's like, oh, he's incompetent. That's right. That's right. Okay. 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 It's fine. All right. It's going to be okay.
It's wild. So wild.
Never thought I'd be so
All right.
happy
Well,
for incompetence.
well, is there anything else that you'd like to add to this podcast today?
um, Pleasure's good.
Mm,
Go pleasure. That's the other
yeah,
thing we've
fill your
scrubbed
life with
from the textbooks too. Yeah. Yeah. That's like, that's what I like to do training for medical professionals to like remind them like our genitals aren't just there for reproduction, but like one of the classes that my favorite class to teach is therapeutic masturbation because we have a big stigma about masturbation, and it's really about like how can you make yourself less anxious, less shamed, less guilt with sexuality. You start with yourself, right? You start, as you were talking about, like exploring yourself and knowing your body and allowing pleasure to happen. I The story has a happy ending, but it starts bad. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma, which is a kind of blood cancer. And it was 5 months of chemo, you know, all the fun things, the hair loss. I kept my eyebrows, but I lost my pubes. It's very weird. I was very unhappy about that. But it changes your relationship with your body. You know, I used to say I have the best body ever because it walks, it talks, it thinks. What more could I ask, right? It does everything a body should do. And then I felt, kind of betrayed. Like cancer, that is not a good body thing to do. Uh, and and sexually, like I did not. I was completely bald. I didn't like that. You know, I got a lot from my hair in terms of just like that's what makes me feel fun and feminine and sexy um and so I didn't have that, and it really changed how I felt with my partner. And so a lot of it came back to masturbation, and it was a way of me like forgiving my body in a way, because I was like, okay, you can give me pleasure, like you are still functioning, you are still doing stuff, you're having a little problem, we're working that out. But you're still doing the things that I'm asking you to do, and that's awesome. And I think the more we can embrace, hey, this is how my body works, like this is a natural function of my body. Sure, sex and reproduction go nicely together, but we wouldn't have all of that without it being fun and pleasurable, right? That's why it's fun and pleasurable, from an evolutionary point of view. But we can still have it be fun and pleasurable without the reproduction. And that's okay. That's a normal, healthy functioning of our body. So go pleasure. That's my
I
that's
love
my
it.
tagline.
Yeah. One of the taglines that I love to use is "Live your life in pleasure."
Yes. Oh, see, that's a much better tagline. You win the tagline pleasure off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jaya
it's
uses it from her erotic blueprints. So it's very
nice. I'll have to incorporate that one as well.
incorporate it and embody it.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually one of our taglines: innovative, embodied, inclusive sex education.
So
Right? To
good.
sound sensual. It sounds yummy.
Mm, delicious.
Well, thank you so much for letting me be on your show. This was so much fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit about what you do and what you have to offer for us down in Denver. Look forward to meeting you in person sometime at your shop.
Yes, that would be wonderful. I love it. Yeah.